Welcome to the pre-reading chapter for 2.4. Keep an eye out for the deponent verbs in this chapter. Those are the verbs that look passive, but translative. Actually, this chapter is interesting because it has both deponent verbs and passive verbs. So you'll have to be careful and pay attention to the difference between the two. Remember, a deponent verb has an OR for the first part of the dictionary entry, but a regular verb just has an O for the first part of the dictionary entry. Hey, here's another note on indirect statements. In the past, we have seen indirect statements that were introduced by the verb dicit. He says, for example, the Latin students are amazing. Well, there are other types of verbs than just the word say that introduce indirect statements. Other verbs that can introduce an indirect statement fall into the category of kissing verbs, KSS. Verbs that have the same meaning as knowing. For example, I know that the Latin students are amazing. So, that the Latin students are amazing can be introduced by the verb that means knowing. Or verbs that have the notion of sensing. For example, I see that the Latin students are amazing. I am sensing that they are amazing. Or I hear that the Latin students are amazing. That's a sensing verb. So verbs that have the idea of knowing or sensing. And then, of course, saying. So you can say that the Latin students are amazing. You can shout that the Latin students are amazing. Or you can even proclaim that the Latin students are amazing. Any verbs that are synonymous with the ideas of knowing, sensing, or saying can introduce an indirect statement. And of course, since we're talking about Romans, they can also gap the main verbs of knowing, sensing, or saying to jump into an indirect statement. So sometimes those verbs are understood in the sentence. In this chapter, we meet a new verb, which is arbitror. Arbitror. Notice it is deponent. And this verb means to know or to think. So arbitror, since it falls in the category of knowing, can introduce an indirect statement. Caesar knows that the Latin students are amazing, or some other synonym for knowing. So indirect statements can be introduced by more verbs than just dicit.